What if I told you that you could have a weapon that is both pretty good for ad clear and single target damage, tracks down your enemies for you, is decent for builds, grants some ability energy as you get kills, and also gives you a massive damage buff that lasts quite a long time as you get kills? Well, Season of Lost is getting off to a pretty fast start because Bungie just dropped a new special ammo Void linear fusion rifle as the seasonal exotic, and there's a lot to like. Today I'm going to break down some of that in this video and give my first impressions on Lorentz Driver. Lorentz Driver is a Void linear fusion rifle, and it takes special ammo similar to Arbalest. In most respects, it is very similar to Arbalest. It has the same charge time, it has the same impact. However, Arbalest does have more range, and that is probably the most noticeable difference besides the perks. So speaking of perks, let's get right into those. Just a forewarning, these perks are kind of long. So first perk is Anomaly, and precision final blows with this weapon create implosions that pull in nearby targets and damage them with an additional detonation. So something kind of comparable to this would be like pre-nerf Duskfield grenades. Pulls in at least combatants pretty strongly, and it'll wipe out red bars and do a pretty decent chunk against yellow bars as well. Second perk is Lagrangian Sight. This weapon marks targets with an automated targeting system. Final blows on marked targets generate a telemetry pattern. Picking up that telemetry pattern grants bonus ability energy, and collecting 3 of those without dying grants this weapon bonus damage for a long duration. So I hope you caught all that. That was a little bit, but basically there's no time gate on that. You can kind of just pick those up at any point during your life, 3 of those telemetry patterns, and once you do, it grants a 50% damage buff. Not only that, this damage buff lasts for 30 seconds, and anytime you pick up that object after killing a marked target again, it's just going to refresh that. So the first perk is really good for clearing ads with the implosion and kind of trapping enemies, and then the second perk, if you can actually proc it, is really strong and actually can rival DPS from some heavy weapons. Now, while it is pretty great, I will say it can be frustrating because the targets that it marks it really is automatic like it says. It's kind of random and it's hard to control. Since the perk lasts 30 seconds though, I feel like that's a pretty decent trade-off, and that was probably their whole idea with the weapon. As far as things that Driver has going for it, it is pretty good for ad clear. I mean, like I said, and like you can see in the gameplay here, the explosion is pretty effective at clearing out ads and dealing damage to larger targets, and it's really not even bad for single target damage, especially with that buff. And usually if a weapon perk gives a damage bonus to that weapon, it will stack with other ability buffs. So you could expect this to stack with Weapons of Light, and perhaps more importantly, one of the artifact mods for this season. There are a lot of artifact mods for linear fusions, scavengers, anti-flinch. There are a lot of options there. It really helps you build easily, but probably one of the most interesting by far is the particle deconstruction perk in the last column. This one grants bonus damage for a short duration against a single combatant as you strike them, stacking up to 5 times with a linear fusion rifle. Also with regular fusion rifles, if that's your thing. So depending on if this stacks with the damage buff from Driver and how much the buff is from particle deconstruction, this could be a contender to be among the best linear fusion rifle DPS in the whole game. I mean, for some reference here, Driver with the buff does 54,991 to Carl, while a nicely rolled threaded needle with Vorpal weapon plus boss spec does about 49,000 damage. So as you can see here, not even including some other potential buffs in the game, Driver is already outpacing some heavy weapon DPS. Of course, that is with the 30-second buff active, but, you know, 30 seconds is not too hard of a buff to keep around. So besides the actual DPS that you could output potentially, another thing that I really like about Driver is that it has lots of playmaking potential in the Crucible. I only tried a couple matches with it, but there were a couple times where I was able to drop health enough from surrounding enemies after getting that headshot implosion damage, and I was able to just clean people up and finish them off with like a sidearm or a hand cannon, and that worked really nicely. It's kind of similar to the way that Cloudstrike can get you plays by just getting some collateral damage and cleaning up, or just getting kills on people that are already damaged. So this one's got a lot of potential to just kind of inject some more chaos into Crucible. Last thing that I'm a big fan of is that there's a catalyst coming that's really only going to make this thing better, and personally I'm hoping it adds some range. Range is probably one of the biggest things that Driver has going against it. You can definitely feel it in PvP too. It gets a little bit more difficult to land shots at range, and that's a stark difference between Arbalest. Arbalest has almost 20 more range, and you can definitely feel that it'll grab you some shots even at further range. So when you're using Driver, definitely keep that in mind and don't try to engage it too far away, otherwise that's a duel you're probably gonna lose. Something else that's pretty obvious, but I feel like it's kind of worth mentioning, is that of course it does take up your exotic slot, and there are some really good choices out there right now, whether you're in endgame content like Grandmasters, where you might want to be using Divinity, or you're picking it over something like Vex Mythoclast, which got a very nice buff recently, or something like Witherhoard. You are making a very conscious sacrifice here by choosing this weapon. And not to complain about this gun, but I am doing a review and I kind of like to draw attention to some of the cons about it. But I will say it kind of feels like Bungie couldn't make up their mind whether or not they wanted you to be using Lorentz Driver in close quarters, or kind of like a regular linear fusion rifle where you're playing a little bit further back. It forces you to run in and grab items to obtain the buff, and although it is a powerful one, it feels kind of weird, and being that close to your enemies just isn't a good time with the linear fusion. You really do need some distance if you're going to land some shots comfortably. So I feel like there's a little bit of dissonance between the way that the perk wants you to play and the way that linear fusions actually work. And another thing is that the targeting is kind of super weird and inconsistent, so it can be frustrating to proc the perk sometimes, and also you just don't know when it's going to work for you or not. I mean, there are times where I was getting random wall hacks in PvP, and then I'd be looking right at somebody and it wouldn't show me. So kind of a strange weapon. I don't know if maybe they were just going for something really random. I mean, the gun looks very mishmash, and the lore kind of indicates that too. It seems very much like a prototype, so if that's what Bungie was going for, they did a great job, but sometimes it results in kind of a inconsistent gameplay experience. Overall though, this is a really fun weapon. It feels great and it sounds even better. I don't know if you've been listening this whole time, but seriously, it has some of the coolest sound effects I've heard in a while in this game. Besides that, it has a chance to be a really good top DPS option with a little bit of building and setup ahead of time, so even if it feels a little bit strange and random with the way the perk is activated, I think this has room to be a very good gun. But all that said though, that is all I have for today. So if you have any thoughts on Lorentz Driver, definitely leave a comment down below and we'll talk about it. I do see all your comments come in and I really do like to engage with you guys. So it's a really interesting weapon and I'm pretty curious to hear what you guys think on it. I'm liking the creativity for this exotic so far, and I'm definitely excited to see what the Catalyst does and what else this season brings. It should be a fun one. But of course, if you enjoyed today's video, I'd be thrilled if you left a like, even subscribed. I generally post Destiny content like this about once a week, so thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys next time. See ya!